Hi everyone, welcome to episode 34 of the Startup Playbook podcast. My name is Rohit Bhargava, and each week I interview successful founders, investors, and subject matter experts on how they got started, the strategies they used to succeed, and their advice to current and future entrepreneurs. In this episode, I interview Chris Bartlett. Chris started life studying theology and as a social worker before moving into the tech space developing websites. He's now the founder and general manager of Seed Digital, a boutique, product development, creative services, technology consulting, and software development firm. In the interview, Chris shares his experiences in learning from failure, the importance on meeting your promises to customers, how to get your first few clients, and how to start as a non-tech founder. Without further ado, here is my interview with Chris Bartlett. Hi Chris, welcome to the Startup Playbook podcast, and thanks so much for taking the time to be here today.
Thank you for having me, Rohit. It's a pleasure.
So I think you've got a really interesting sort of background and experience. Can you share a little bit of what kind of got you here today?
Yeah, I guess here, being a product developer, I work for a company called Seed. We do product development, but in that, I didn't start out as a product developer. I started out studying theology. And I also started out as a social worker, and my kind of, transition from social work all the way over through to web and mobile development and ultimately strategy and UX has been a transition, but those kind of points have connected us and got us to where we are now. So I guess my background started when I was 19 and I kind of just up and left Victoria. I'm sorry for all the Victorians listening. I moved to Sydney for close to a decade, and I guess I was on a search for, testing what I've known, and I went up there to study theology. So I came from a kind of very kind of religious background, but I jumped in a car with $200 and just left and booked myself into study to learn about the church and God and people, which was a whole adventure in itself, which ultimately led me to social work. In social work, I was tasked with working in what's called intensive service supports, which is kind of the worst of the worst of the worst of the worst kids. Generally don't last very long in that, but I ended up doing that for maybe 4 years and building really great relationships with kids that had just been thrown to the curb, literally, and working through these complex human issues. I saw a real need for, social impact. I saw a real need for how we relate to one another and how we, treat those who have been given less. And I got very frustrated with the system, as you do. But then I got curious, and that curiosity led me to technology. So I guess that curiosity that led me to technology was based around how do we continue to scale this impact that we have on individuals, which I was seeing in youth work. The change that happens doesn't happen instantly, but it happens over time. How do we reach more people? And how do we do that in a really uplifting, holistic way? So I kind of looked into technology. This was probably 2009-ish. And I got really curious with what technology actually does, which is it increases reach, the amount of speed of processing and information retrieval, so we can do things faster and better, but they are not necessarily the answer. The answer is the human problem. Technology is the tool. I guess around that, I started learning to code whilst I was working in refuges late at night, looking after young people all around Sydney, and I just basically started building things, Google searching, lynda.com, Hello World was, where everybody starts, and those applications, became, products that people started to like, and then they said, hey, can you build that for me? Or can you build this for me? And I suppose it grew from there to where we are now, with a full agency, working on multiple products for both, people with ideas all the way through to large companies looking to internally innovate. But it's all that trial by fire, and I guess the underlying factor in that is the human need, which comes from that social work background. So there's probably 1,000 other stories of, learning and failure and, in there where you kind of, hit your head against the wall and, you can't get this piece of code to work or it doesn't make sense. So you build a product that nobody uses. Then you build one that everybody uses but it breaks in production. There's all that sort of stuff. This is many years ago. We don't do that now. But yeah, like the kind of exodus came from this different background where I was looking at the way people approach the world, and I was looking at the people in the world and the way the world approaches them, and where technology fits in that, and how can we use technology as a tool to enable individuals to come into the fullness of who they are. And then hence Seed was born 3 years ago, and we've grown and grown and grown and grown. And I've had the pleasure of working on some really awesome projects, which has kind of seen the fulfillment of that, 8 years later.
Fantastic. So what was that process like of, I guess, studying theology and being sort of part of that environment to then switching over to tech and that kind of early stage? Was that a difficult kind of process for you? Or?
Yeah. I mean, it's two worlds that you're trying to merge into one. I guess starting out in theology, you have a framework of information that you're given, and then you test that in a real world environment. And sometimes that framework in theory doesn't line up with the practical application, which is how I led to social work. But you have this ongoing testing of what you've learnt and how it works in the world that we live in. I guess those things can be applied to technology, and not just technology, but launching a product or an idea. We have the theory of it, but how does it actually work in reality? And I guess, we can have all the knowledge that we have, and when you're studying things like theology, you're filling your head and you think you know things, but you don't know unless you know. I think, was that Tupac? And knowledge itself puffs up and makes us think that we have the answer, but when that knowledge hits the reality of a real world environment, that's when you kind of have that wisdom which comes from both knowledge and practical experience. So it was a hard transition because I was constantly being wrong, and I constantly thought that I was probably better than I was. And learning to balance your own, you're very passionate in your early 20s, you just want to get out there, you think you've got these ideas that change the world, but sometimes you don't. Sometimes you think something is a certain way, but it's not. And that process of continual refining, is kind of what, we now do in continuous improvement when we're building software, but it's actually applicable in those other kind of crafts like, social work, theology, all those sorts of things. You're testing the framework of what you know, and then as quickly as you can reapplying your learning. So it was very hard, and it was ego shattering. I cried a lot when I was wrong. I made lots of mistakes. I tried other business ideas using this sort of stuff, which blew up and failed. But it's the continued application of that learning that kind of starts to formulate something. And you don't ever arrive, but it's that state of holding those three things in, I suppose, the tension of that kind of gives you a bit of progress and a bit of an understanding of how to guide forward. And then you begin to, as you build products on the other end, you know how to minimize risk, you know what to avoid. So guess what I learned through all of that is what not to do instead of how something's done.
Yeah.
And so that gives you a bit more of an understanding. But yeah, it was a hard transition from theology. I personally still have a faith, but a hard transition from that to social work, because there's a huge kind of juxtaposition between what's taught in churches and, I think the word's juxtaposition, but what's taught in the church and also the reality of what's going on in the actual culture of social work, culture of humanity. And that's holding two opposing truths. And then moving that into technology, there's the way things should be done and how it feels, and how it should, but there's a reality of how to get it there and how to navigate those things. So yeah, lots of learning, but lots of banging your head against the wall and lots of admission of being wrong. Admission of, paying a high cost, both physically, mentally, financially, relationally as well, in that learning. And then, you do start to see the fruit of that, which is really cool. But, you look back and go, wow, I never thought that I'd have to go through that. But now I kind of see things differently, and that seeing allows you to pave a way forward in what you're doing, in your craft, in your business, in your relational lives. There is I'm sure there's lots of obstacles, but you kind of learn to mitigate and move around them and continue on. Yeah.
Yeah. So, on that, I know we've spoken months ago about talking about failure and
yep.
things like that. If you can kind of share some of the major learning points or things that kind of came across and how you overcame them, because I don't think a lot of people are kind of, especially in the startup space, everything seems to be great all the time.
It's not like, when you scratch beneath the surface with a lot of founders, they're broke, they need to find $3,000 by 4 p.m. They need to pay people, they need to do this, they need to do that. And the weight and the pressure of the idea versus the birthing of that into reality is coming down on them. But what you're learning in that process is actually how to do that. I've had periods, I suppose, many years ago where I'm like, how do I pay these people? How do I pay this bill? How do I, where I bit off more than I can chew? And that is the learning, like learning your own limitation, but also learning how to put the accelerator on it at the right pace where, it's stressful, and so stressful, like, okay, what do I do? So I sell my Xbox, to pay the power bill or pay my home internet, and it's not something that people talk about. It hurts, and it hurts your pride so much because people perceive you in this world like, the thing that gets said a lot is that perception is reality. And that's true to a point when you're meeting someone, but once perception has moved into reality, reality is then reality. So you have this kind of dichotomy of worlds that people live in where they're living in a world where they're perceived one way. And it's your ego completely being blown up day in, day out. I mean, that's, one fail is learning to balance your cash. Man, that's like the hardest lesson to learn in a business. Because that problem doesn't go away if you're, depending on the business you're running, well, whatever it is, product or service, you're always going to have that issue. And I see too many founders out there who aren't going to ask the question, how do I manage my cash? What is a cash flow statement? Like, people don't know until they know, and they're too afraid to ask the question, which leads them into these places. And sometimes that desperation of the consequences of not asking the question lead you to a point where your ego is so smashed that you have to ask the question, and somebody goes, hey, this is how you manage your cash flow. This is actually how you do this. This is how you market yourself. This is how you would, activate a growth channel for a product or service. So a lot of what I've learned, firsthand, which we apply into the things we build, relationship breakdown, both, romantic and, I suppose, friends. I've had friends who kind of don't understand, hey, you're working a lot. Sorry, I'm not hanging out with you.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I love you regardless of the amount of time I've spent. But people will drift away and they won't get why you're doing what you're doing, and you will fail people by your own ego and stubbornness, and they will get hurt, and that's so hard. I guess this really comes down to, why you're doing what you're doing. Are you doing it for this, to get rich or die trying? See how many rappers I can quote in this. That's never ever going to be sustainable. If you're doing it to, I suppose, expand relationship, expand. I see technology as a way of expanding community. I hope that it doesn't go the way of the BuzzFeeds of the world where we're all just kind of, consuming less and less relevant information. I hope it gets clearer, and I hope it's like a global village where we know more about each other and we're able to be more vulnerable. That's what I hope. That's why I do what I do. But if you're doing it to just get rich, man, you're going to have a hard time. You may even become very successful in that, but you become very lonely. So it's the balance of all these things, and I haven't figured all them out. We're still learning. Other failures are, get your legal contracts right. I had a business a few years ago. I had no legal contract. Lost huge amounts of money. Went backwards into debt. We're talking 60 grand in debt, in one day, and spending time and effort clawing your way back to zero to get back on your feet. If I had just signed a contract, I would have avoided all of that. And so, but I didn't know, and my pride wouldn't let me ask. And so I guess in those failures, you learn to ask, and you learn that you can't do it on your own. That's why they call it a company, because it's a group, a company of people. It's not about, and we've got this kind of, I suppose, in this day and age, this kind of hero mentality of, Iron Man or Elon Musk or all these people who go it on their own. But what you don't see in the public is the horde of people behind them, supporting them, and bringing all these things about. And it really is a group effort. And the sooner you learn that, the sooner you learn to put your ego aside and ask questions, and be wrong, the sooner you'll actually see success. But it's so hard because we think that we've got the answer, but we don't. Yeah, I digressed a little bit there, but did we touch on failure?
No, absolutely. In terms of some of your personal experience, and obviously now working with a range of different sort of everything from startups
Yeah.
to larger corporates. What are some things that you wish that more startup founders would know prior to them starting a business?
Yeah, this is a good one. Understand what your customer values and actually deliver on that value. So we talk about value propositions, we talk about business model canvas, we talk about, user journey maps, we talk about innovation tools, we talk about lean startup. But at the end of the day, if you can, I've forgotten what the psychological term for it is, but it's the projection of my mind and empathy into someone else and putting yourself in someone else's shoes. Understand where they're coming from and why they're purchasing your product or service, and then deliver on it. A lot of people, I think, overpromise and they sell to something that they either sell something that's not applicable, doesn't have product market fit. They think that people want it, but they don't. So if you do find something that somebody wants, find out why they want it. And then keep asking that question, why? Is it because it makes them feel good? Is it, boost their social status? Why? Understand your consumer's behavior, because understanding that is the key. And then also delivering on fulfilling that need or that problem. I'm very big on that. Like, a lot of people oversell and underdeliver. And this is particularly in the startup world, and I think it's part of ego. I think it's part of the culture we live in, to be, hey, we can do all things to all men. Don't be all things to all men. Understand why people want to work with you or want your product, and then undersell it and then over-deliver it. And that is, neurologically, like neuroscience said, if you undersell and over-deliver, people get a dopamine hit. They're like, wow, this is amazing. It's how you evangelize people. But you can't have that without understanding your customers and where they come and what they really want, and then aligning what you have to solve that problem, and actually solve it. Don't just tell them that you're going to solve it. Don't just try and make them feel good. They're smart. Like, it's not just about emotions and fluff. It's about respect. Respecting, hey, I'm here to help you with this, and I'll put my shoulder to the plow right next to you and push through and persevere. Like, regardless of, the cost. Sometimes you lose money on those sorts of things, but if you promise to actually fulfill that need, wow, they'll refer more work. Your business will blow up because you've evangelized them. They've become, you've solved the problem, and they want to tell everybody, hey, I had a big problem, whether it's teeth whitening or and it got solved by this person, and this person can solve your problem too, or this product can solve your problem. Don't oversell. Don't sell a problem that's not actually a problem, and then deliver. And deliver with complete and utter unadulterated excellence in what you do. That's what I would tell the startup world, because I see so much noise, and we're making noise, but it's like a resounding gong or clanging cymbal. Where is the substance? And that's what we're looking for. We're looking for that underlying substance in this sea of chaos of the world that we live in, where somebody actually goes, hey, he actually did what he said he was going to do. He delivered on it, and I'm down with that. Like, this guy, he'll do it again. You should meet him. Or this product, you should buy this. It's delivered. It's solved the problem. That's what I would drive home. Don't fake it till you make it. Actually, be excellent. Yeah, I'm using a lot of cliches and referring to a lot of rappers.
It's so funny. Like, I actually had a conversation with someone this morning about startups and faking it till you make it. Do you think that there's a time and place for it?
I guess the product, can it deliver? Obviously products and services, two very different things. People buy. That introduction that you make, they will perceive you instantaneously, scientifically, on perception. So I do wear a suit, and they have judged me in 30 seconds. But then if you can, I suppose, present in the way that they accept, then follow through with the substance, that's really the only place I see a place for that. I guess if you can't deliver on it, don't do it. That's what I'd say.
Yeah.
Right? And don't back yourself to a point where you've kind of put yourself in too deep, where you can't. And if you get in that state, be honest and say, I'm in too deep, I'm wrong, and then pay the price for it, because you'll win your customers back. That's how I'd kind of handle that. So it's a good question. But yeah, it's a tough one.
Yeah, I mean, at some stage you need to be able to back up what you're saying.
That's right. Well, yeah, like if somebody says, I'm going to give you $100 to buy this thing that does X, and then they give you $100 and they don't buy it, or you don't actually have it, they're going to be angry. So, I guess it's the logic of that. But if you can go get that, and you know that the risk of going and getting that is and it not following through is minimal, then that's okay. So I guess it's about checks and balances and measuring risk. But yeah.
Sure. So I guess we went down a little bit of a rabbit hole there. But I guess looking at Seed, so can you tell us a little bit about Seed Digital and what you guys do?
Yeah, so we're essentially a product development agency, and we work with both kind of founders and large enterprise. Say, for example, a large enterprise will hire us and say, we've got an issue. It might be, the lay-by system and people aren't using it, or it might be we're spending too much on trolleys. And these are kind of human-centered design problems. So we take these tools, these design thinking tools, and apply them to the problem. And then we have the other implementation of how we would actually not just solve the problem, test it in a real-world environment, but then how we would actually implement a solution into their system and get an outcome that's desirable. Often a company will come with an idea that, hey, well, let's just drive down cost and increase profit, but that is at the loss of their customers. So we really, in that side, take in the customers, take in their needs and understanding. Now, on the same side, you've got your founder out there who's got an idea, and it's a very similar process. It's okay, we have an idea, we have a hypothesis of that this idea may solve a problem or create a solution, so we go test that, we call that prototyping. So we're literally using the same product development process for founders and large enterprises to achieve the same goals. I guess the founders are often a lot more hands-on. We're teaching them how to do user research. We're teaching them how to get out there and actually make sales. We don't do that for them. We give them the tools and the push. And it also shows us if they're the sort of client who are actually going to follow through. So from that, we call this kind of discovery. We then move into, once that's validated, visual design, prototyping, UI. And this works on both fronts of the founder and kind of the larger enterprise, where we can kind of present that and test that again and get the feedback in the market. If that's something that will actually solve this problem, or it'll increase customer satisfaction, or it will decrease debt to the state, or who knows what that problem is. So they can be very different from founders to enterprises, and we see our skill sets across design and development as a utility belt, which we can apply to fixing those things, and technology as a solution. So we've worked with lots of founders, we've worked with lots of large companies, and the results are generally fun and good, because we've mitigated risk through that process as we go using those design tools.
Sure.
I didn't say too many buzzwords, did I?
You mentioned that, so I'm sure there are a couple of listeners here who are either a B2B business or a service-based business, or selling a product into sort of large clients. So you mentioned that one of the group of customers that you work with have a self-identified problem.
Yeah.
How do you find those sort of customers, and how do you get in front of them?
How do we find our customers?
Yeah, or for any sort of startup that's kind of playing in that space, how do they go about getting their first few clients on board?
Generally, I suppose in the service-based space, what we do is referral. But I mean, there's no right marketing plan for any one business. Like, each business is going to have a different plan and a different way of getting their first customers. Sometimes if it's just, say, an idea, we'll test the idea and we'll check up some Facebook ads. And we'll see how many clicks came through, and we'll see if there were any conversions. And then how do we fulfill on this need manually? And we call this prototyping, which is kind of pre-prototyping. But it really is, what is the right channel for your business? For us, a lot of it comes through the work we've done. So the referral and the on-referral, and that's been built up over many years. And people will come to us because they know, one, we will deliver, and we won't even get into an engagement that we're not going to deliver on. So that's reputation. On that, we've have content that we put out there. But if you're a startup in the service space, and you offering a service to client accounting, whatever it is, ask your friends and family. They know people, or ask to be introduced to people. Read the newspaper and figure out what the big problems are, and then find that person who has that problem in that company and send them an email. I mean, we've had some great success with some large organizations, and people email you back. Write a funny email. I wrote a self-defacing email to one of the heads of Telstra or whatever it was, and he emailed me back. He said it was the funniest email he'd ever read and connected me to a person. But you're looking for problem solution fit. So I have a solution. If my solution is accounting, who has the problem of accounting? If I have a solution, my solution is helping legally, who has the problem? Read the newspaper, reach out. But generally, most good businesses can start with their direct family and friends. It's the same with raising capital, family and friends, and then branch out. And then, depending on it, there's probably about 18, 19 different marketing channels once you have a bit of budget to put in. Search engine marketing, social media marketing, content strategy, podcasting, PR. PR is often quite cheap, but it really depends on the business. So if you're looking for your first customers, my first customer came because I was living in Sydney at the time, and I was building things, and I started showing what I was building to my friends, and then my friend, said, I know somebody who wants to build this. Can you build that? And I'm like, yeah, well, I can because I've built this before, and that's actually how my first customer came, because of my craft. So that's my business. That may not work if you're, say, doing a business where you're trying to, sell cleaning products. Set up on the side of the road and sell cleaning products and see who buys them. What I will say is, in every action you do around your marketing, record it, right? So who's buying? How old are they? Where do they live? Get your own data and analytics. But depending on the company, it's going to be different. For a service-based company, and for people who are freelancing and first starting out, ask your family and friends. If you want to be bold, read the news and figure out where the problems are in the news, and just send an email. There's a really good tool, Email Hunter. You go on LinkedIn, you find somebody, you press a button, and it gives you their email. So it's amazing. This is not a plug for them, by the way, but it's a really good tool. I guess then as you have a bit more traction, a bit more budget, start investing in content. Content's a really long play. It's really good for brand. It's really good for building authority, that you know what you're talking about. And it's really actually quite therapeutic writing or doing content, because you learn as you do, and you get better as well. So content's a great brand building exercise. If you're looking for quick conversions, or you've got a kind of a widget or a product that is fast moving, search engine marketing, social media marketing. But don't start with I had unfortunate experience of seeing somebody plow about $40,000 last year into a large ad campaign, and it didn't work. Start out small, run a $100 Facebook ad campaign. If it doesn't work, you've lost $100, you haven't lost $10,000, right? Test those multiple channels. I think, there's a really good book, Traction, that you should read, which kind of explains that, but it's actually how to continually test those different channels and the result thereof. But literally ask your family and friends to begin with. Go out and talk to random people on the street. They'll look at you really weird. They'll make you feel really awkward, but that's fine. Yeah. I ran a business where I just started knocking on doors. And that business went from 2 people knocking on doors. So I think the biggest week, it was $70,000 we turned over in a week. And it's that's where it starts. Just knock, just do something, do an action, and then measure that action.
Yeah, I mean, just on grow channels as well, one of the things that I kind of tell a lot of startups and clients that I kind of work with is that everything works, just not everything works for you.
That's right.
So it's a matter of kind of testing and working out specifically where your customers are, specifically what they engage with, and those sort of things. So don't put $40,000 into an ad campaign if that's not where your customers are, or if that's not what they engage with. So.
Yeah, de-risk and remove assumption. That's one of the things you learn through kind of those ego-crushing moments is, you don't know. We don't know. So don't pretend you do, and don't throw a huge amount of weight into it, but make smaller bets and gambling, smaller gambles. And if you lose, that's okay, because you're not kind of throwing an all in. But yeah, the right channel, as you said, is going to be different for different companies.
So one of the things that I kind of really wanted to talk to you about, and one of the biggest problems that I kind of see in the startup space, is that a lot of people have come from non-tech backgrounds. Mm-hmm. So they're usually, marketing, sales, whatever. They have a concept, they have a problem that they want to solve for, or a potential solution.
Yeah.
The next phase is, crap, I need a technical co-founder, or I need a developer to kind of help me build that out. What is your recommendation on what that process should look like, and what does a good tech product look like to you?
What is a good? Well, that's different for product to product. It's not always pretty, but I think it solves that human problem. So, like, joke around that my job is actually telling people that they don't need to build an app, because half the time when I'm talking to someone, I'm like, you don't need an app, right? You can do that with this. You can do that with. So it's a good tech product solves the actual problem. And that begins with understanding what the problem is. There's kind of two questions there, and I'll loop back around on the technical co-founder question. But what a good product looks like is the path of least resistance to that feeling of relief, that feeling of pain relief for a customer. So I guess, beer is an example of that on a hot day. I go drink a beer and I feel refreshed. That's not solving my thirst problem. That's solving the feeling I have of feeling hot and bothered. I'm going to get thirsty again. So that's, a good product. But it's also a product which is going to loop me back into drinking more beer because I'm not refreshed and I'm not hydrated. So a tech product is not always going to look how you think it's going to look. Sometimes people go, well, this is really simple. And that's actually the beauty of it. It should be really simple. Actually, to get it to a quality that is really good, it should be stupidly simple. I see a lot of people out there who come in and they have a product and they're like, I want this feature, I want this feature, I want this feature. And I'm like, why? You don't need that feature. What does that feature even do? Like, there's a lot of people think, oh, we'll just share from within our app and everybody will see it on Facebook and they'll download our app. And it's like, well, why would they share it? So a good product is an understanding of what your customer's pain is and the quickest way to facilitate that, because we're pretty impatient these days. Can I do it in 2 clicks? Cool, I need to get an Uber. Bam, I've pressed one button. It's a good product. They have billions, of dollars and millions that they invest in development, but it's non-complex. It understands how an individual interacts with technology, not how technology interacts with an individual. Which then brings about my second point around technical co-founders. I guess you always want to, if you're building a product, you always want to have a sense and understanding of technology. In retail currently, there's a lot of kind of, boutiques out there who are going online. This has been happening for 5 to 10 years. And they're used to the bricks and mortar model, and they have this clash of understanding technology. And you have old school management who understands how to run a shop, but they don't understand how to run an online shop. And they're two very different things. And if you have a manager who actually doesn't have technical skills or understanding, or an understanding of how these things work, it actually can stammer the business. So I think that having a level of understanding about technology is very important, and I hope they teach more and more of it in school. I'm sure they will. But you don't need to understand all the way down to, how this interacts with that in ASM, which I was digging around in my days. You don't need to understand that. You need to understand how the big pieces work together. If you're looking for a technical co-founder, make sure they also understand the human element. You've got to be careful what you say. Developers are beautiful people, but they're highly complex people. I'm a developer. I'm a highly complex person, and make sure that they understand that it's not about adding kind of the latest library or the latest feature. It's about solving the human problem. Always bring it back to the human problem. And if they can't see that, then you're probably dealing with somebody who is great at technology, but will stammer the growth of business and a product. So look and ask questions about the people that you kind of get into business with. I guess on that is, a great leader in business needs to have a general understanding of, especially if you're running a tech business, a general understanding. Do some courses, like maybe, understand HTML or understand front-end development, or just high-level courses. It'll probably take you a week, but at least you'll know and you'll be able to look at what they're doing and understand the speak. But if you're relying on somebody to be your eyes and ears, there's always going to be communication breakdowns. So I would suggest that most people who are running a tech business, including older management in the retail space, including young upstarts, have a basic level of understanding of how this stuff all fits together. Because you'll be making managerial decisions about a business without knowing the outcome of those decisions, and that's a black box that you're putting it into. Maybe demystify it. We'll say one thing about teaching myself to code, and I want to encourage everybody who's listening to this, is that when I first looked at code, I was like, I have no idea what's going on here. This is like, but as you start to dig and like, it starts to come together. And it's not as scary or as complex as us developers and engineers would really like to make out. Like there's actually, once you understand some of those base principles, you can look at stuff and you go, I see what's going on here. So don't be afraid of learning a little bit of code. You don't need to be the coder building the platform, but have the tools to understand, to talk to the people who are engineering these things, and the understanding of how we deploy to production, understanding how we test, understanding that what the process is, not just like you go deal with that, come back, work with them. That's my kind of take on being a technical, having a tech business, which I think more and more every business is becoming. So I think everybody should have at least a baseline level of understanding of how this technology works.
Are there any tools, resources, courses that you would recommend to people who want to learn?
I started out learning on lynda.com. This is years and years and years ago when it was, I don't even think it was mobile responsive at the time. YouTube, Meetup. Go talk to, if you want to learn about something, go hang out with the people who know about it, right? And just say, listen, I'm a noob. I don't understand, but I'm willing to learn. If you want to understand, I suppose, PHP as a language, go to the PHP meetup group and just spend time. Google PHP development or how to develop in PHP or PHP 101 or React 101 or where do I start? There is so much online learning that can be done. I will say in that, have a personal project that you're building. Have something that you can practically apply it to, not just necessarily the tutorials. That's kind of my take on it. Online resources, Google, Lynda, Meetup. There is so much free stuff out there. Get amongst it. There's also courses that you can pay for. They're pretty good. I haven't used them, but I've seen courses do it. Go, hang out at a development shop and work on your own project. Just do.
So you mentioned that, and I've seen this with a lot of people who have tech co-founders as well. Is as you mentioned, wanting to, they're very very precious over what it is that they're creating, and obviously everyone wants to do the best work possible, and they don't want to put out an inferior product into the world when it's got their name attached. And I guess even a lot of non-tech people have a very sort of an idea in their head of what all of the features and everything that they kind of want to include. And I know you've written a couple of blog posts on involving sort of customers through that process.
Yeah.
What does that process look like in terms of having customers involved as part of the product creation or the product design? I
think it's one of the centerpieces to involve your customers. They should be pretty much involved from day dot. And then if you don't have customers, you should be figuring out who your customers are. That feedback loop is essential. What I think is good, I've got a bit of experience, but it may not apply to a scenario for that specific customer. So I can put together a prototype and show it to a customer and they're like, oh, this makes a lot of sense. But often it's not actually solving the problem. So I guess one of the things we do as a company is that when we have a founder and we kind of teach them to do their own user research, this actually helps educate them in making decisions around the application. You can see if there's a resistance in them around them actually getting that, and changing, which will actually inform you in the very beginning if the application is going to be good. Because if they're open to change and feedback and learning from the customers, then you can tell that the app will move to a good place. But if they're not, it kind of can stop. And because that's core. I'm not solving, and people don't kind of pay us to solve an issue for them. We solve it for their customer. and we come alongside and support them in that and give them the training tools they need. So user research is at the core of everything, and the ability to measure that and quickly implement it. But we teach generally our customers to do it. Sometimes, say, a larger organization, they don't have the resource for that, they've just given us a project. We will then do it. But I mean, I've seen a lot of these people around the agencies, and they say, what is validation of an idea? And they're like, I went down to the shopping center and spoke to 5 people. I'm like, that's not validation of an idea. Validation of an idea is, I've actually delivered on a product in even a practical way, and that prototyping way. I learned from that and I reapplied it, and I made money. Because if it's a business idea, it's going to make money. But custom research, user research, and educating of clients or educating of founders in how to move beyond their ideas is key to success. And I've seen it with founders who are just like, nah, it's my way or the highway. And that's based on their ego. Or the other side of that is, yep, cool, let's change it. This is what the data says, this is what the feedback is, let's change it. And then you see the growth that comes with that. It's the centerpiece. Understanding people is the most important piece in building technology.
Can you talk to what some of those processes are like? So you mentioned that you kind of teach your founders to essentially do that themselves. Can you kind of show on a high level what that kind of looks like?
Yeah, I can. Just trying to think of examples. I've got one guy doing something today. I guess somebody will come, like we're talking the idea stage, so prototyping. So how do we validate an idea? How do we put it in the market? Do we put up, depends on the idea really, but I'll use tools like Zapier and Google Sheets to kind of put together an ad hoc prototype and send out some ads into the market and get some feedback. But then if they're delivering a product, I'll go and make them make that product. We can mass manufacture this, once we're at scale, but can we actually deliver on a smaller and actually fulfill it? If that's a product, if it's a service, cool, let's try some ads over here. If this is a service they want, we think that this is the sort of clientele, we'll narrow that down based on who's kind of clicking on those ads, and then we'll go deliver that service. In the market, technology scales, but it doesn't scale a lack of business model. So we're trying to actually fit that business model. Second to that is that when we start to prototype an actual technology solution, we'll talk about usability testing. We'll talk about how to actually do that, how they can sit in a room with potential users, not just their family and friends, and how they can actually go through that interviewing process whilst gaining feedback on the application or the prototype that's been built. And we teach them not to ask leading questions. We teach them to be very stoic and understand how the user is relating to them, and we will set up the framework and go through an interview with them, but they then are the ones gathering the data and the information, and then from there we can give recommendations, but they make the decisions. So that's a different take on user research and usability testing, and that's great for founders because they're face to face with their users and they get to ask the hard questions like, would you actually buy this? Cool, it looks really pretty, but does it actually work? Did it kind of do what you thought it was going to do? And so that process of kind of, looking at a product from all angles, is teaching them to do that, not just their own angle.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest things that I kind of see a lot of startups do, and you kind of touched on this as well, is, when they're looking for validation of their idea, they'll talk to their friends, they'll talk to their family, because they're the easiest people to reach, and it's hard going out and talking to other people. Really, from your point of view in terms of validation, how does a startup founder know whether they're just talking to the wrong customer segment, or whether their idea just doesn't have the legs that they thought that it did?
What's the point? What's the point that which or one of the things is, it is hard to measure that if people are telling you what you want to hear. So in that, you would always defer to a third party who acts on behalf of not just you, but the business idea itself. That's the best way to go about it. So, I don't know, come to Rohit and he'll tell you if it's a good idea, if he's going to be knocking down your doors. But you would tell them, I would not use this. I guess don't just, include your family and friends, but, include, when you're getting customers in the beginning, ask your family and friends for customers, but not just those inner circles, the outer circles. There is no point where there is no risk. That's just fact. The more information you have, the more educated you are in your decisions, but that risk will be reduced by larger numbers. So 5 people at a shopping centre, that's high risk that I'm wrong. 100 people at a shopping centre, well, I'm going to get more information. I'm going to know. I've spoken to, Janine, who's 35, and she's actually signed up for my therapeutic massage, and she's going to pay me $35, except I know that Laurie, who's 86, is not going to. So we've got 100 of them, right? I can start to narrow down the risk. But there will always be risk. The more, the better. And what's the point where you know that it hasn't worked? Well, I guess if nobody's buying, that you need to completely rethink it. Then if there are a few people buying, you need to look at that segment in the market, and you need to say, okay, how big is this segment, and how do I reach this segment, and can I reach this segment? And of this segment, I've interviewed maybe 10 people, and 2 people have taken it up. So I'm, possibly able to get. And what are those 2 people worth? So it's checks and balances. You're never going to completely de-risk any project, but at the same time, when you know that the juice isn't worth the squeeze, and you can look at it in a sober kind of way, from a kind of data or questionnaire, or how many people actually bought your massage product, or whatever the product is, then you can make an educated decision as this is not going to work. But if we change it, maybe it will. So maybe I'm actually need to sell a spa pack to someone else, with it, and maybe Laurie or Janine will actually purchase it. So that's where you start to pivot.
Great. And so finally, I guess being a web development shop, you have a lot of people coming to you with non-tech skills, or as non-tech founders. How does a non-tech startup founder start a startup?
Yep. Is it a tech startup?
Yep.
Okay, so my definition of a startup is not just tech. A startup is an idea, looking for validation of business model. How does a non-tech startup founder start a tech business?
Yes.
With a lot of humility. I guess it's in any business, it's always going to come down to proactivity, but it's proactivity in the right way. So taking a non-tech founder, I would say, you need to start learning, like I said, a base level of tech. I would say I would go to a meetup, even if I don't understand a word of what they're saying. I would then go and say I want to go to the React meetup down in at Kogan. I'd go down there and I'd just talk to people and just say, oh, cool, I'm thinking about starting a tech business. What do you think? And it's those conversations and the proactivity in those conversations which will start to educate. I'd say that they also need to be learning, online. And I'd say have your own tech product, which is just really basic. Do a to-do list. Just do something, which is teaching you the base level of skills. A non-tech founder may have great marketing skills, but if you don't understand the process, you won't find the right people, you won't speak the right language, you won't be able to kind of balance the whole business. So I would say be proactive, learn some tech, go to a meetup and talk to people. Talk some more, make friends and make good friends. These people are phenomenal people, and ask questions. And that all comes with not knowing and knowing that you don't know. So be okay with that. Because the more okay you are with that, the more educated you become. And the more you'll be able to learn and grow in that side. Find the right people. And by that, when you're building a tech business, the right people means people that have the right motivation. If the underlying motivation for the business is to, have a great change in the car space where pollution is less, that's great. But if they're just here to get money or fame or, look good, they're the wrong people. So find the right people, and you only do that through testing and getting to know people. And also understand people aren't perfect. Have grace with people. That's my, learn, go, talk. Simply.
Fantastic. Chris, thanks so much for your time and for your insights today. If anyone wants to find out more about you, get in touch, follow your story, what's the best way for them to do that?
They can email me, christopher@seeddigital.co, or they can hit up our website, it's seeddigital.co. Happy to chat.
Perfect. I'll make sure that those links are on the show notes. Chris, once again, thanks for your time.
Thank you, Rohit.
Thanks for listening to episode 34 of the Startup Playbook podcast. You can find the show notes of my interview with Chris, along with a curated list of tools and resources for startup founders at startupplaybook.co. As always, you can join the conversation through our Twitter account. The handle is @PlaybookStartup. In the next episode, I interview Andrew Hyde. Andrew was the founder of Startup Weekend, a movement that went from 70 people attending a hackathon to a large global community of startup enthusiasts, which now operates in over 150 countries and has close to 200,000 alumni members. He was also one of the major building blocks behind the startup community in Boulder, Colorado, recognized as one of the top startup ecosystems globally. In the interview, Andrew shares the key components of an effective community, overcoming barriers, when funding can be harmful, and the advantages of starting a startup in Australia. Don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date with our latest episodes. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you at episode 35 next week.